Welcome back to Self Love Ignited. Today on the podcast, I had the pleasure of interviewing Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane is an embodiment teacher and coach who helps fellow childless, not by choice women establish trust and connection with themselves and their bodies. Sarah Jane came on to share her story of being childless, not by choice. She had a long journey with infertility that ended up having a hysterectomy in the end. So she came on to share that story, how that impacted her relationship with herself, her relationship with her body, her other relationships in her life, how she managed to move through the grief, and now how she is able to help other women do the same. This is something that is a really important conversation. I think we have all either been through or we know someone who has been through miscarriage, infertility, and it is a struggle. And you know what? If this is you, you're not alone. There is hope. And I hope that this conversation with Sarah Jane is going to help you feel that, have more self compassion for yourself, and help you heal and move on through it. My name is Katie Allen, and this is Self Love Ignited. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today on Self Love Ignited, I have the pleasure of interviewing Sarah Jane. Welcome. I'm so excited that we are having this conversation. Finally, we first connected a while ago. So I just really want to welcome you and invite you to introduce yourself to everyone listening.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
My name's Sarah Jane. I live on the west coast of Canada on a small island called Salt Spring Island. I have a dog. I have a big garden, which is bursting with food at the moment because we're recording this in August. So I just had a big salad of cucumbers, tomatoes, and basil that I grew in my garden, and I'm feeling pretty happy.
Yum. Yum. Summer in Canada is the best, I think. And it's short, so you have to enjoy every little bit of it. It sounds
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. It sounds amazing. Yeah. So, okay. So this podcast, Self Love Ignited, we're talking about your story, your very unique story about self-love. Now, I know a little bit about it, only because we've spoken before, but I really just want to invite you to share your story in your own words. So, your challenges with yourself, with your body, your relation, sort of your inner ecosystem. Where did those begin for you, and what did that look like?
Hmm. Well, I think my journey along the self-love path started really early on as a young girl, but I'd like to focus on my journey to self-acceptance and self-love through infertility and childlessness, and that story starts, I guess, 11, 12 years ago. I met my now husband, and we wanted to increase our family by having a baby, but it didn't really work out. We had multiple miscarriages, unexplained infertility, and then in 2018, I had a chronic illness that resulted in having a hysterectomy. So I am permanently childless. And so that whole decade-long experience really did a number on my relationship with my body, and also my relationship with myself and my self-acceptance and self-love. So there's been many things that I've encountered along the way, but the grief of not being able to have a child when I wanted one really kind of got stuck for a while. And I think it's because I didn't really realize that I was actually grieving, and that I was sort of like grieving the losses, like the actual losses, the miscarriages, but also grieving something that my body couldn't or wouldn't do, that I saw other people's bodies doing around me, and it looked like no problem from the outside, but of course, who knows what those people were going through on the inside.
Yeah.
And also the loss of a future that I had imagined. And so grieving all of those losses, and I felt they kind of got stuck in my body
Hmm.
for a long time, and that
Hmm.
also reflected on how I felt about myself and about my body, and therefore my level of self-love and self-acceptance.
Yeah. Well, there is such I don't know what the term for it is. I mean, I guess just like a societal norm or an expectation of women that, if we choose to have children, we can just do it. And it should just be easy. And it's just something that our bodies should just do. And it should be no problem. Like you said, you see other people doing it. It seemed like just a normal, natural, not a problem thing. And of course, we never know. We never
Yeah.
know what's happening behind the scenes, but that is our perception. Um,
Mhm.
and you being able to identify all of the different layers of grief, like when you lay it out like that is a lot for one person. I mean, I get that this is your husband as well, but we're just focusing on your story today. That is a lot for one person to manage. That, like we've all grieved something or someone in our lives, but grieving miscarriages, grieving a future, grieving the family that you wanted, all of those things at the same time, like no wonder it got stuck.
Mm,
you know
yeah. Yeah, and there's talking about societal norms with miscarriage, they're so common
Mhm.
that they often kind of get just sort of brushed aside. Um, and it's a really big deal. And it is a distinct loss. But there's this kind of idea, that, oh, well, just try again, or like, oh, well, at least you can get pregnant, just move on. And where there needs to be time taken to really grieve that loss and acknowledge it as a loss.
Yeah.
Even if folks around you aren't necessarily acknowledging it, I think you have to acknowledge it as the person going through it to
Yes.
be able to sort of move forwards with it. You're never going to get over it. It's never going to be gone and way back there, but we can move forwards with these things that we've experienced and move forwards on the path to acceptance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us what that looked like for you. Um, and I suppose this it's sort of a twofold, right? It's accepting your life, accepting this new version of your life, and accepting your body in a very
Mm.
different way. And you said you also you had to have a hysterectomy as well. So there was like some
Mhm.
health, some physical sort of stuff that went along with it. So what did that acceptance,
Mhm.
how did that begin? How did you do that?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Having the hysterectomy was really a turning point for me because it was a definitive sort of line in the sand that, okay, this isn't going to happen anymore. We'd stopped actively trying, but still there was always this like, oh, well, what if? Like I still could, like you could have, some miracle, you hear
Yep.
about these like miracle stories that people have, oh, just relax and then you'll have your baby, that kind of thing.
Yes. Yes.
But once I had the hysterectomy, it's like, okay, there's no miracle is going to happen there.
Right.
So it actually allowed me to fully turn the page. I wasn't that sort of like constant, sort of like in the background, the what if.
Hmm.
And that's when I really felt like that I could really grieve. And also because it was really tangible and it's it's easier to grieve things that are tangible, right?
Yes.
Like somehow we feel like we have more of a right to it, whereas things that are less tangible, there's actually a word for it. It's a disenfranchised grief. So it's kind of like a grief that is very real, but it's not recognized, and so therefore we feel like we don't really have a right to
Yeah.
treat it as a loss. But the hysterectomy was a very firm loss. And quite frankly, I was relieved, a
Mm.
certain, because for 10 years of trying and failing, and trying to keep the hope alive and it just like not happening. It was a lot of work, it was a lot of pressure.
Hmm.
And so it felt like a relief to be on the other side of that. And that's when I could really start to grieve and sort of imagine, okay, what is my life going to be like now? Because I had always had the identity of like well, I'm going to be a mom in the future, right? And so that was never going to happen. So who am I without that identity?
Yeah.
And it took a long time, and it's still evolving. It's been 4 years since then, and I'm still becoming who I am, as we all are, as we age and move along in our lives. But yeah, it gave me the opportunity to start to rethink.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what is your relationship like with yourself and with your body now? 4 years out, how has that changed? How
Mm.
has that been read? And like you said, it's an ongoing thing. There's no end. There's no end point.
Mhm.
But up until now,
Mhm.
what's the difference now? How do you relate to your body and yourself differently now than you did at that time?
Mm. Mhm. Well, when I got the diagnosis that I was going to have a hysterectomy, I was really sort of grieving the loss of having a period. And that would took like 5 minutes to get over, because I was like, what? Why? This has been like horrible since I was 11. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why? What? No. So it's been amazing not to be in pain every month and to go through. I still have a hormone cycle because I have my ovaries, but I don't have a period.
Right.
And so that was a big change in my relationship to my body. And learning to sort of accept the scars, because the surgery was quite large. So I have a lot of large scars on my belly. So at first I was like, oh, great, to kind of have this like upside down crucifix kind of looking thing on my belly,
Yeah.
which now I just think is kind of comical, because I mean, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think I've really learned to not take my body so seriously, not in
Yeah.
a way of like lacking care, but not be so concerned with the physical appearance.
Right.
I think maybe that's also getting older. I'm going to be 47 this year, and it's sort of like, well, it is what it is. Been working with it my whole life, and it's pretty much looked the same my whole life. So the chances are it's not going to really change
Right.
now. you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say a big part of that sort of coming to terms with what I look like and what my body does has been through movement practice. I'm a longtime yoga teacher, and I practice in a space with a mirror, which at first I didn't really like at all, because it was like, why do I want to see myself in all of these like bizarre shapes and that with a mirror? But it really helped me be like, okay, this is what I look like, and
Mhm.
create that acceptance of myself. Like, this is me, this is it.
Yeah.
So the movement in front of the mirror was one aspect, but then the actual movement practice itself, coming from a perspective of acceptance and of self-compassion. So not moving in a way that's like really rapid and for exercise. I know that lots of folks do yoga for exercise, and it's a great exercise regime, but it also has other aspects to it as well, and doesn't have to be only approached in the sort of like super like hyper physical, hyper flexible kind of way.
Yeah.
It can be approached in a way where every movement is done with the idea of accepting what your body wants to do, and having compassion for yourself and changing things when you're getting the signals that like, oh no, I don't feel like this today, or like that's too much pushing, or that's too much stretching.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. I've been doing yoga for 14 years now, I think. So I understand. And I just want to say on your story about doing yoga in front of the mirror, doing yoga in front of a mirror is one of the biggest pieces of the beginning of my journey.
Mm.
Yeah, and just
Mm.
seeing in all the poses where you're like, oh, that's unattractive, and look, and you can see this, and you can see this, and when you do it over time and you open your mind, it's incredibly transformational. So I'm with you, like a hundred
Mhm.
percent. We have very different journeys, right? My journey is nothing to do with, not being able to have children, um,
Mhm.
but it's still a relationship with our bodies and redefining it
Mhm.
and coming to terms with
Yeah.
it. And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And being a longtime yoga teacher too, seeing so many different bodies
Mhm.
doing all kinds of things, and everybody, no matter what they look like when they're standing up straight, there's always things that look kind of weird and lumpy and rolly, and what, like, when everybody's doing all the stuff.
Yeah.
So that's also been a big part of it too, is being around other people's bodies in a
Mm.
conscious way. We're around other people's bodies all the time,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to sort of not in like a comparison, but just like, oh, interesting.
Right. Well, and as a yoga teacher, depending on your style, I know all teachers are different, but some
Yeah.
teachers do adjustments, or you're checking your students to make sure that they're in alignment and that they're not going to injure
Yeah.
themselves, right? So you're looking very objectively and from like a caring, making sure that they're
Mm.
safe kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very unique perspective
Yeah.
that I don't think many people have the opportunity to be with bodies in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you. I would agree with you for sure. So, okay. So, yoga was a big part of your journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yoga, mindful movement, being with your body was a big
Mm-hmm.
part of redefining that relationship with yourself, coming to peace with it. Was there anything else that played a big part in this journey? Was that,
Mm.
like meditation? Did you work with a therapist? Were you journaling? Like what other sort of tangible things helped you?
Yes, all those things that you just said.
Cool.
And more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sort of my personal practice isn't just movement based. Yoga also incorporates breath work, meditation, and self study. And so that's where the self reflection, that's where the journaling comes in. So, yeah, doing these movement practices, and particularly guided meditation, because I found in times when feelings were really big, silent meditation just didn't work for me. And I've had a lot of students say the same thing. So to be guided by somebody who's kind of on the same page, don't have to be exactly on the same page, but with a voice that you like, and use like languaging that you relate to and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
um, really helped dial in that focus and concentration. Because in grief, my mind was just a total mess, and so like coming to the mat for that focus, that sort of just trying to see things from a bit of a different perspective. And so that's where the guided meditation came in.
Yeah.
I had great counselors, and also connecting with other childless women has
Mm.
been huge, um, because so much of our stories, not that they're the exact same, the details aren't the same, but the feelings are very similar.
Yeah.
And speaking with other people who can have that kind of shared humanity, that made me realize that, like, I'm not, my teacher likes to say, terminally unique, that that everything that I have ever thought or felt, there's somebody out there who has had the same experience.
Yes.
And meeting with people, it's mainly been through online communities, meeting with other women who are childless not by choice, and sort of sharing stories and sharing support has been huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that community and sharing, especially in times of grief, is underrated.
Mm,
It is underrated for sure.
yeah,
Because grief can be a really lonely process.
absolutely. Yeah, we're kind of grief phobic in our culture,
Mhm.
so People, we don't really know how to do it, what to do, and so we isolate.
We do. We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this journey that you've been on, do you identify this as a self-love journey? Is it an acceptance journey? Is it like a body acceptance journey? Like if you had to sort of pick a term that feels most true for you right now, what would that be, do you think?
I think it would be compassionate self-acceptance.
Mm, beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, compassionate self-acceptance. As you walk this journey of compassionate self-acceptance, how do you take care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually? How do you take care of yourself differently now compared to years ago when you were still sort of
Mm.
in that sort of dark
Hmm.
space?
I say no a lot more.
Mm,
My relationship with boundaries has gotten a lot better.
yeah.
Uh, for instance, I'm kind of past the point where friends of mine are having kids and having babies, but while I was going through my infertility journey, that was happening a lot.
Mhm.
And so I'd get invited to baby showers and, like, first, second birthdays, gender reveals, all the things.
Yep.
And sometimes in the beginning, I really didn't want to go, but I went because, like, oh, I have to be a supportive friend and it's not about me and like all these kind of things, but then sit there just like dying inside and, often like going to the bathroom and crying and coming back and, pretending I got
Yeah.
something in my eye and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but as as I went through the journey, I realized that, well, I couldn't keep like letting myself down in that way to sort of supposedly show up for others, because I wasn't actually able to show up for them in
Mm,
that time, right? I was there as a body, but I wasn't actually there able to be with them and celebrate with them.
yeah.
So this is one example of boundaries and saying no.
I think that's a great one, though. Boundaries is one thing that so many people struggle with. And we end up sacrificing ourselves, sacrificing our mental health, right? Our emotional well-being
Mm-hmm.
sometimes to,
Yeah,
to just to not rock the boat. But then we end up sinking our own ship. Everybody else is fine.
totally.
We're going
Exactly.
down like in like a
Yeah,
puddle of tears in the bathroom hiding.
totally. Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
else is fine, but I can't say no.
Yeah, and then you kind of end up being this like resentful people
Yes.
pleaser,
Yes.
which that's not, nobody wants. Like, I don't want to be like that. Nobody else wants me to be like that.
No.
So, like, it's not pleasing anybody.
No. No. In the end, it's not. In the end, it's not. Resentful people pleaser. I feel like that's a really, I think I know a few of those. Like it's a very descriptive term. I think I used to be one actually, now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking about like that sounds like me about 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure I was one of them. Yeah, but we grow, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, now that your relationship with yourself again is changing, is evolving, your boundaries are much different. How have your other relationships changed? Whether that be with friends, whether that be with your husband or other family members. How do you show up differently now compared to how you used to? Or do you show up differently now?
Pretty sure I show up differently now. I'm not that sort of resentful people pleaser that we just talked about. And I think that well, I don't think, I know that I'm more comfortable
Mm,
in who I am.
mhm,
During the infertility journey, it was always like trying to do something and failing. So constantly
mhm.
feeling that. And like I was like just not able to do this thing that seemed so natural and normal. So it would come with a big sense of failure. And in the years of deep grief, and sort of that sort of like clouded all of my relationships and how I showed up. So I think as I've worked with the grief and worked to integrate it into who I am and moved more towards acceptance of childlessness and therefore the acceptance of myself, I think I'm more open, I'm more calm, and just at ease in all relationships.
Mm.
Not all the time, obviously, because different things happen.
Yeah, but but I mean, having that be like the overarching theme, having that be like the umbrella that it falls under, right? Just being more at ease in general. That's beautiful. Sounds beautiful. If you could go back, I'm really curious. If you could go back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when you were sort of in the depths of this infertility journey, when you were still trying, when there was all the unknowns, if you could go back and give any advice to your younger self, what do you think you would say?
I would say to start looking around for role models and examples of people who were living and embracing a childless life sooner. So I don't think, I know that I stretched it way, way out, sort of like the trying, because I didn't have those role models. I couldn't really see what it might look like on the other side. And I couldn't really get past the sort of the personal failing aspect of it. And had I known or thought about or been clear enough to sort of do a quick internet search, I would have found that there is whole communities of childless women just ready to support others. So I wish I'd sought out that community support earlier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is good advice. And I feel like there's probably some people listening who hopefully will take that advice. Yeah, yeah. How has this journey, compassionate self-acceptance, I think you called it, how has this journey to compassionate self-acceptance influenced your journey to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, I have been, as I said, a long-time yoga teacher. I have a yoga studio in my house. And for the majority of my yoga teaching career, which has been about 12 years, I've taught to just general populations. Through my own practice and seeing how much the yoga practice with the basis of self-compassion had an impact on me, I decided to sort of take everything that I had been working with and offer it to other women who were childless not by choice. So it was sort of one of those pandemic gifts where we were all forced to go online. And as I live on a small island, it's a really small population, I was able to launch these offerings like beyond my geographical area and connect with some really amazing women through this work.
That's incredible. It's I mean, I know you've been doing this for a long time, but like you said, due to the pandemic, we were forced, and everybody, like all of us in our own way, were forced to change how we do things, change how we work, change how we relate to other people. And as much as yes, there was many challenges, many challenges in there, some incredible blessings as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this kind of work, because it's so vulnerable and people are showing up, work with the body is vulnerable no matter what.
Yes.
But then work with the body with a long history of infertility and grief and being isolated, not speaking to other people about it is even more vulnerable. So people being able to be in their own homes, in their own spaces where they feel safe already to then show up and do this work, it's the great environment to do it in.
I imagine it would really help the healing process too, because you're feeling safe from day one instead of going in and having to develop that rapport and that safety feeling, right? Like, so I feel like it would actually be better in a lot of ways for people.
I think so too. I absolutely think so. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. It's interesting. I actually noticed that with the work that I do, obviously very different from the work that you do, but with coaching, some people really like being on video, and some people, the
Mm,
second you turn the video off, completely changes it because they
mhm,
feel safe. It's like a little cocoon, right? So it's just like being
mhm.
on a phone call. They can still hear you, but
Yeah,
there's this extra element of safety. And I think that when we can identify that, use it. Anything that makes you feel
totally.
safe, use it.
Yeah,
Like don't
absolutely.
shy. So many people, oh, but I should be able to, I should do this in person. I should.
Yeah, no,
No, you know.
no, no.
Make it work for
That's
you.
the, ground rule number one of compassionate self-acceptance. Like, what do I need
Yeah.
to feel safe and cared for? And even that, coming to that place where you might feel comfortable saying, like, actually, I'd like to have the video off,
Mhm.
is a huge step.
It is. It really is. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, Sarah Jane, is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything else on your heart? Any last bits of wisdom? Do you have any questions for me? Anything else sort of that you would like to bring out in this conversation? We've talked
Hmm.
about a lot.
We have talked about a lot.
Yes, we have.
um, No, I've said it a couple of times, but just sort of restating the fact of finding community, sort of like no
Yeah.
matter what your journey to self-acceptance and self-love looks like, it can be sort of boosted into high gear by finding others who have similar situations, because we're often more able to be compassionate and be accepting of others. And so if
Mhm.
we can meet those people and see that they have the same story, and that you have the idea that, well, they haven't failed, they're not a failure, they're having this, they're open up to the possibilities of embracing this, then we can see that that's possible, and then hopefully give that to ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to find your work, the amazing work that you're doing, where's the best place for them to do that?
This place is through my website, embodiedpossibility.com.
Okay.
And I have a number of free resources there for folks to download and try out.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. This has been wonderful. It is one that um is very different from my story, obviously. I am childless by circumstance.
Mm.
But it's such an important conversation. And, I think we all, whether you've been through it or not, we all know people who have suffered miscarriage, who have suffered infertility, who have gone through this. And so many people suffer in silence.
Mm.
Um, and it impacts everything in your world, as you know. And, this conversation today, we talked specifically about how it impacted your relationship with yourself.
Mhm.
And having conversations like this is healing. It is helpful. It
Mhm.
is impactful. So thank you for being willing to be very candid with us and share your story today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It sure has.